So below me is the location of the Mountain Meadows Massacre. It was here in 1857 where around 140 men, women, and children were killed by mainly a local Latter-day Saint militia. I'm at a memorial right now built to remember the victims and this horrible event. Here you can see the names of the victims, and these pipes here point to where the events happened. In this direction is where the caravan fought off the militia and Native Americans for several days. And in this direction is where the men were murdered. As well, in this direction was where the women and children were murdered. This was a tragic and horrible event, a stain on Latter-day Saint and American West history. But how did this happen? What led these men to commit such horrible crimes? And how much was Brigham Young, the leader of the church, involved? Was he to blame, or has he been unfairly blamed? Let's quickly go to another location and start answering these questions. This is a monument built by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. As a Latter-day Saint myself, we need to not just accept this for what it is, but also learn from it. From Mountain Meadows, we learned some valuable lessons. So let's quickly review the history. So what was happening here during this time? It was actually a time of fear for the Utah Saints. A U.S. Army of 1,500 troops was on its way to Utah with a new governor to replace Brigham Young. The Saints, still with vivid memories of the persecution and murder they faced back east, were on edge. They thought that the army was on its way to tear them down. Also, just a month before this event, one of the church's leaders, Parley P. Pratt, was murdered back east in Arkansas. He was a beloved leader, and his murder only added to the Saints' fears. Also, just before this time, leaders such as Brigham Young were preaching very strong sermons. While much of it was overwhelmingly positive, some of it was harsh about their enemies, and some members took the words too far. It helped create an us versus them mentality. The Saints were filled with fear, and many were also filled with anger. They thought that there would be a war between them and the army, and they were advised to save their grain and supplies in case they needed to flee into the mountains. And this posed a huge problem for other caravans of pioneers making their way to California, and the Baker and Fancher caravan from Arkansas would suffer the most. As they passed through Utah, they were met with oppositions. The Saints were hesitant to sell their supplies due to the incoming U.S. Army. Conflict and rumors abounded, especially as the caravan arrived in Cedar City. Now, to be clear, we only have one side of the story from the early Latter-day Saints, but rumors spread that the caravan might have poisoned some water and cattle. But it was later discovered, though, that what actually happened was probably a bacteria, like anthrax, but the Saints fell for the rumors. Some in the caravan, frustrated, made threats to the Saints in Cedar City, that they would join the incoming army to attack them, or that they even had the very gun that killed Joseph Smith. Now, to be fair to the caravan, the captain of it rebuked all these actions by his team. However, one night, a couple men from the caravan, supposedly drunk, came to the house of the Cedar City stake president, Isaac Haight, and threatened his life. This infuriated Haight, even to the point that after the caravan left, Haight wanted to attack them. Haight had several council meetings with local leaders and proposed an attack on the train. The council refused the idea, and they decided to rush a rider with a letter to Brigham Young in Salt Lake City for his guidance. But Haight and another leader, John D. Lee, recruited the local natives to attack the wagon trains, telling them that the caravan would join the army and kill Mormons and natives. Lee and Haight intended to make it look like an Indian massacre. For years, the natives were blamed for the incident, but we'll soon find out that that wasn't the case. Now, let's quickly go to a different spot, just right over here to continue the story. So here is a plaque remembering the spot where the wagon train was attacked. It was a 5-day siege. A few immigrants were killed, and Haight's plan seemed to be working until 2 immigrants had separated from the group and 2 militia had spotted them and shot at them, killing 1. However, another survived and made it here back to the wagon train, and he could tell everyone that he had seen 2 white men attacking him. Haight's small militia was now exposed in their deception. What started as a plan designed to blame it on the natives and possibly not kill everyone quickly devolved into something much, much worse. The militia leaders now were terrified. If the train happened to escape, they'd probably tell people in California about the Mormons attacking them. Or worse, they'd tell the incoming U.S. Army of the attack. Haight and them were under pressure to hide their crimes. Another council was held between local leaders. Haight didn't share everything, but asked for the rest of the militia to help him. Again, they decided not to attack, but that they should even help the immigrants. However, after the meeting, Haight spoke privately with militia leader William Dame. Dame, although disagreeing twice in previous councils, let Haight use the rest of the militia to solve Haight's problem. John D. Lee and the militia, under a white flag, convinced the wagon train that they could escort them past the natives and bring them to safety. But the group would need to leave their weapons behind. The wagon train, desperate for food and almost out of ammo, had no choice but to agree. They separated the men from the women and marched about a mile north. It was about here where the militia, when ordered, turned their weapons on the men and executed them. And just a bit further up the road is one more location. And it was here where the militia and Native Americans finished the job. Only 17 very young children were spared. In total, around 140 people were unjustly killed. But what happened with the letter to Brigham Young? Just 2 days after the massacre, the letter came in. It said,
"In regard to emigration trains passing through our settlements, we must not interfere with them until they are first notified to keep away. You must not meddle with them. The Indians we expect will do as they please, but you should try and preserve good feelings with them. If those who are there will leave, let them go in peace."
After reading this letter, Haight broke down into tears, saying, "Too late, too late," showing that he knew that Brigham Young asked them to not bother the pioneers. Brigham Young wasn't to blame for the killings. If anything, his sermons helped fuel the fear the saints were feeling. But these local leaders took it way too far. The aftermath of the massacre was slow. The militia blamed the local Native Americans. Brigham Young was getting information in bits and pieces. At first, he was told it was the Native Americans. As he slowly started learning the truth, he sent inquiries, and eventually several members were excommunicated, and one was even executed. Many spent their lives hiding from the law. What added to the slowness of all this was not just the conflict with the U.S. Army, but then the Civil War happened shortly after, taking away the attention of government officials. 17 children survived, and eventually the government returned them to their relatives in Arkansas. So what can we learn from all of this? Richard Turley is one of the top researchers about this event. He says it teaches us to avoid fanaticism, or in other words, extremism. In charged times when people vilify an opposing group, they do things they wouldn't normally do. In today's heated world and politics, we see this happening all around us. Mountain Meadows shows that Latter-day Saints aren't immune to this. Sometimes we may excuse strong language and rhetoric, not realizing that some may take it literally, and over time, it can even degrade us. Now, I think it's important to say that the population during this time was about 30,000 in Utah. I don't think it's fair to blame tens of thousands of saints back then and millions today based on the acts of dozens who carried out this horrible crime. This was a hard video, but it had to be made. But hopefully by understanding the context, we can see the majority of the blame falls upon the militia leaders who went too far, who didn't wait for Brigham Young, who didn't listen to the church councils that told them to stop.